Hi, welcome back to the channel. Michelle, and today I'm going to be doing my end of the year review for my 12-year-old daughter who was in 6th grade this past year. So I have a lot of subject areas to cover, so I'm going to get straight into it. To recap, she had a really great year. I think we're getting into some really interesting subjects and discussions and kind of seeing her, in middle school growing into different things. It's been really fun, and I really do enjoy homeschooling so far in these years. I think it's really interesting. So I'm going to flip the camera around and go through everything she did this year and tell you how it went. So first up, I'm going to talk about health. So for this year, we concluded our puberty study and also went into periods, and then we're getting into relationships and things like that as well. So these are the 3 books. She had health once a week throughout the year. Usually on Mondays, and I would mark things for her to read, and then we would have discussion afterwards. So this is the first one she read, which was Uology. Again, I really like this. I do prefer, especially when we're talking about puberty, books that give you both perspectives of male and female. So I think it's really important to know both. I do think there's a lot of stigma that girls only know things about girls. Kind of like when I was in school, the girls were put in one room to learn about something and the boys were put in another room. That's not what I wanted for her. I want her to have a more well-rounded education when it comes to that. So this was a good book, very inclusive, really enjoyed it, had some good discussion. This one I really enjoyed. Be period positive, reframe your thinking and reshape the future of menstruation. It's a DK book. So we talk about the history of periods, which I actually found interesting myself, kind of looking at historically how it's been viewed, looking at kind of reshaping period positivity. And one of the things it mentioned, which I thought was really interesting, was, think about tampon and pad commercials. At least when I was a kid, they were all about preventing leaks, and nothing would be more horrible than, having a leak in a certain situation, and what kind of that's conveying to girls and women, that we should be ashamed of these things happening to our body, or heaven forbid, there's a leak. Half the population gets a period. This is not something to be shameful. So I really do like kind of how it switches and talks about that. Blood, hormones, fertility, contraception. I really did enjoy that it went through perimenopause and menopause. So it kind of gives you from the beginning to the absolute end. And I myself found that specifically interesting. So again, I think looking at the attitudes and perceptions of periods, what products were used historically, I thought that was interesting. Menstrual shame. It goes through all the different products. Again, these are really good conversations to be having with our kids, both male and female. I fully plan on, my son, when the time comes, to completely learn all this too. There's no reason that it should solely be on females to learn this. I think everyone has to have a general knowledge of how everything works. So I really enjoyed this book. And then she's finishing up this right now. She's not currently done, but we will finish it up. So we've done all of them in the series. There's multiple, and this is for the oldest age group, because obviously you're talking about relationships and sex. What I like about this one particularly was the graphics in it, I think, are, although they're cartoonish, which I think some people might not like, I like that they're depicting different body types. They're depicting a lot of differences in people and sizes and shapes. I think that's really important for kids to see, although I can see, people are like, oh my God, it's nudity. But it's important that we understand bodies are different. So it goes over, what is sex? We're looking at male, female, but not just the difference between gender, so gender identity, things like that. That is something we talk about in our house as well. So it goes over sexual reproduction, sexual desire. It talks about gay as a completely normal thing. It gives historically accurate information that, homosexuality is not something new. So I really do appreciate that. It's going over both male and female anatomy in here. Again, a puberty section, both male and female. Families and babies, all different types of families. Pregnancy, staying healthy. So I do think there's some good information in here. And I think it's a lot of information. I think it's including information that's important to talk about. That's how we look at gender identity. And of course, given the publication of this, you know, when we're talking about laws, some things have changed in that. So obviously when we get to this section, I'll have to tell my kids, you know, what's going on with that. But it's, you know, for an older age group, I think it's 10 and above. But again, this is trailing up. We've talked about these topics leading up to this. So after this, we're gonna get more into relationships, both friendships and romantic relationships. So I think giving our kids the information, having those discussions with them is how we kind of build up. It's a conversation that keeps going on. But she finished all these, except this one. She's currently still working on that until summer. Next, we're gonna do some of her independent work. So she did capitalization and punctuation, and this was just because when I had her math tested last year, she did not score well in mechanics of writing, so capitalization, punctuation, commas, all those things. So I had her work through this book, and again, it went really well. I think it really did help, and I have seen an improvement in her writing, and I'm just really happy to see her actually using commas and like apostrophes in her writing now. I think it's important for her to have that, and it was quick, so that she would do a rotation between this, vocabulary workshop, editor-in-chief, grade 4 through 5, and then brain food. So again, she did vocabulary workshop. She's done this the last few years. It works really well for her. I got this used off thrift books. Again, I don't think there was any writing in it. Sometimes it's hit and miss with it. The last 2 times I've gotten off thrift books were significantly cheaper. There hasn't been writing in it, but it works really well for her. Again, she's a kid that is an avid reader, so she's exposed to a lot of vocabulary naturally. So I think it's right on level for where she is, because she needs a little bit more than I think we've seen in a lot of vocabulary curriculum, that she's higher up there. She needs some more. And I do like that it's given in, you're kind of given how it's used, the context it's used, and then you're giving the vocabulary words, and then you have different activities, choosing the right words, synonyms, antonyms, completing the sentence, vocabulary and context. And then we have another unit, same thing, you're given 4 vocabulary words. And the activities vary, they're not always the same. Choosing the right word, antonyms, completing the sentence, vocabulary and context. So you can see this is more towards the back of it, but it works really well. This is something we will continue on with her. And then editor-in-chief, I don't have the copy anymore because once she fully used it, I just recycled it. Went really well. Again, that was helping with some of those mechanics that she was not, some of the mechanics she was weaker in, kind of help fill that gap. And again, she likes editor-in-chief. We finished it. It may come back next year, we shall see. And the last one is brain food, which I'm gonna take you to my computer for. So this is from Hearth and Story, Brain Food, grade 5, and this was something she did with her independent work. And again, there are things in here I really thought was good for her, so we were looking at logical fallacies. Some of the projects in here didn't really fit for her, but that's fine, I just crossed them off. But again, it's just little bits and pieces. This is one of the first things we've done with Hearth and Story. We're going to be doing a literature unit this summer, so I will come back and tell you kind of my thoughts on that. But again, you know, the biography project, she has these types of projects already in her literature, so I didn't really think that was important for her to be doing. Planning a schedule, things like that. She already knows things like that. Editing, we have a separate writing curriculum, so there are things in here that did not apply to her, but there's little things in here that I think were helpful. So universal rule, I really like going over that. So overall, I think she enjoyed the brain food. It kind of broke up and was something different than we did, but not all of it was applicable to her. So next will be, let's get into math. So she continued doing math review sheets. Again, I have the Math Mammoth printed bundle. PDF, print them out. She would do a sheet a day just for retention. She had some difficulties with 6, 7, 8, and 9 for some reason, multiplication tables halfway through the year. So I just printed out some drill sheets for her. I don't know where those facts went. We spent an entire year doing them, and I don't know if it's just, you know, preteen brain changes, hormones, some things are flying out the brain. So she did have to do some drill sheets throughout the year just to remember some things. But the bulk of her math, she did dimensions, 5A and 5B. Again, I think this goes really well. We do the textbook, the workbook, and the test booklet. So textbook, I do the direct instruction. I'm teaching the lesson. Workbook, she is doing, demonstrating that she can do the work. Oftentimes there are questions in here that she needs guidance or assistance with. And then test booklet, she does completely independently, no help from me, unless it's a clarification question, because I need to see what she can do by herself, because we're doing the direct, I do, we do. She needs to show me she can do it too. She can demonstrate the skills she's learned independently. So again, this is going really well. Is it easy? No, I'm gonna be completely honest. 5B, especially, there's a geometry section. It got me. It required me to sit down and kind of relearn math, and luckily my husband, this chapter here, my husband is really naturally gifted in math, so he was able to kind of tutor me on it, and I spent a Saturday kind of going over this and making sure I could do every single problem, because I don't use any video lessons or anything like that. I am still the direct instruction teacher when it comes to math, and that's how I really want to keep it as long as I can. I do think we are fully capable as homeschool parents of doing upper levels of math. We just have to take the time and really learn and put the effort into it. We can absolutely do it. And I have to say, we crushed geometry. Geometry was my hardest subject in school. It's the only thing I ever got a C in my entire academics. And that was with a tutor, mind you. It was really hard for me to grasp the concept, especially with proofs. Now going through this, I understand it so much better, and it's funny because my 12-year-old grasped the concepts so much quicker than I did, and I think because she's done dimensions for so long, she has such a better foundation than I did that it was a natural step process for her. So, again, this went really well. It was difficult. There were parts I had to sit down and relearn and prepare myself before I was able to teach. Some of the things I would recommend that we've been doing is she's been keeping math notes. So this is just a notebook that she's used to do calculations in the past. But when we're talking about more complicated subjects, having some reminders is helpful, and I think her physically writing down some math notes is also beneficial. So I wanted to show you some of the things that she's kept in here. So first we have some printables that I have in here that I think are just helpful. So conversions. This was a black line master specifically from dimensions. And then she was going through order of operations. So this is a quick freebie from Teachers Pay Teachers that I printed for her so she'd have a reminder, a visual reminder. This is something the mom librarian recommended to me because dimensions word problems are ridiculously hard, and they demonstrate, you have to be able to demonstrate how to do the problem. It's not a simple word problem. It's written in a way where the only way you're gonna get the answer is if you know how to do the problem. So she suggested cubes, which has worked really well for my oldest. Just going through those really complicated word problems and circling the key numbers, underlining the question, because often in dimensions questions, in order to answer the final question, you have to do like 4 steps prior to that. So making sure you're getting those steps done and answering the final question. I've even brought this in with my 8-year-old daughter who's doing Dimensions 3, just because she's getting into word problems too as well. So having these visual cues helps them kind of break it down, because it can be overwhelming looking at this problem that you know is going to be 4 or 5 steps to figure out. There's a lot of wording. This gives them a way to break it down and be less intimidating. And then some math notes that she has written. So we're talking about mixed numbers to improper fractions. Recently we were doing fractions to decimal equivalents, so she'll write those notes. And then when we were doing geometry, she was doing triangles, right angles. So having these is helpful because having all this, shoved in your brain is really hard to do, especially at 12 when your brain is changing drastically. Having things to look back at, I think, is really helpful. So when she's doing her workbook, so for example, she did a practice lesson today, so she did it independently. She had her math notes. So one, she wasn't constantly asking me like, well, she needs to learn how to kind of do that herself, how to problem solve herself. So if she has her notes available to her, she can look back and say, okay, this is what this means, so this is what I need to do. So really giving them the tools of that independence, but still being there and being the main source of information, I think is really important because she needs to be able to do these things without me, but I also need to provide enough instruction that she understands it. I'm not just, releasing her and saying, here, figure this out yourself. I gave the direct instruction, we practiced it together, you need to demonstrate it yourself because sometimes that is how we learn too, that we work through those problems and frustration and kind of find the problem solving. We can't always just give them the next step, but that's gone really well. Next, let's get into language arts. So she's been doing phonetic zoo, and we changed this a little of how we do it. So she was using the audio in the beginning of the year, and she kept getting stuck on just a handful of words because you have to get the words right a certain number of times before you can move on to the next list. And it just, something was not clicking there. So after some, investigation into what works with her, I found instead of using audio, doing it with her and me being the audio version of that is so much more beneficial. I don't know if it's because she naturally listens to my voice better than the audio provided, whatever it be. But when we're doing it, we're doing the jingle, but we're also I'm inserting if there's a specific spelling rule for her to help with that. I've come to realize she is very much a sight word speller, and that's for, a couple different reasons. That's because she reads a ton, so she's exposed to a lot of information and words that way, so it just naturally comes to her. She has a very good memory when it comes to it. Secondly, she was in public school, K through second grade, and that's how they taught spelling. It wasn't spelling rules, it was sight word spelling. We were given a list every week. So that's kind of her natural default when it comes to spelling. And I've just kind of leaned into that. So we go to the jingle, we go over the words, but I also give the rules as we're going through it so she can have a better understanding of why that is the way it is. So we use this more for the lists because, again, I do think it is helpful having a higher level. Like, she's got A down, she's working through B. And most of the time she gets a lot of them right. She barely missed going into C. So I think slowly going through this has been beneficial for her. But again, we just had to tweak it to a point that works for her specific brain. We have not used any of these cards. We just use the jingle, I do the audio, and we do the words together, and I explain using a whiteboard any spelling rules that go along with that. But spelling, we're going well with that. So let's get into her bulk of language arts, which was Lightning Literature, grade 6. So this is the student workbook and the teacher guide. So I'm gonna start with what she read this year. I had her divided into books she liked, books that she was neutral, didn't like, dislike, and then books she didn't like. So we're gonna start with the books she read for Lightning Literature that she liked. So she read The Wednesday Wars, which she enjoyed, Pax, which she really enjoyed, and The Wind in the Willows, which she really liked. That is what we finished the year with, and I just got the illustrated copy because my 8-year-old in core knowledge was using The Wind in the Willows, so I wanted a copy so I could compare the two. But she really enjoyed this, and she really enjoys kind of fantasy animal books like that. So those are the ones she liked. These are the neutral. She didn't like or dislike them, they were fine. So The View from Saturday, A Long Walk to Water, Roll of Thunder, Hear Me Cry. She liked how realistic this was. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. This is not her first time reading this. She read this during the COVID pandemic years because she was desperate to read anything we had in the house. So she read this already, so she was familiar. I think that's kind of why it's not in the like pile. She's also not that kind of, fantasy reader. And then the only book she didn't like was Yellow Star. And it wasn't anything wrong with the book. She said that we've just gone over history so much that she already could guess the plot and she already knew what was gonna happen. So it wasn't really a thrilling read. It was more of a, okay, I already kind of know this story and I'm familiar with what's gonna happen. So there's nothing wrong with the book. It's just we've covered this a lot in history. So what I really like about Lighting Literature Grade 6, now she's done this since she came home from public school in 3rd grade. She's done every single year, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade. And I really like it. I think it works really well for her. I do like the literature selections. I think, as you can see from her, book stacks, it's exposing her to literature she's not necessarily gonna pick up herself. And she does read a ton. I don't have to assign her anything outside of this because she reads everything. We went to the library a couple weeks ago and I was trying to find books for her to read, and every single book I picked up she's already read. So I took her up to the young adult section. All 5 books I picked out she's already read. So she's constantly reading. One thing I would say that I think changed is somewhere through half the workbook, it jumped up a level. So it went from, just a couple pages, so this would be day 1, to answering the questions, to we're having like 4 or 5 days of instruction, or 4 or 5 days, 4 or 5 pages of the amount of reading, not the book reading. I think the scheduled book reading was pretty, it was easy for her to do. That wasn't an issue. But the grammar lessons definitely increased in length as time went on. And it got to the point where it's a lot to process. So I stepped in and started doing more direct instruction, which is completely fine. Just because my daughter's in 6th grade does not mean I should just be handing her a book and expecting her to teach herself. I have heard people kind of talk about the length of these. For me, that just means I need to step in and do some teaching, which is kind of my job. So I don't have an issue with that. But I will say that it increased in the amount of work and reading. One thing she really enjoyed were the poetry units. There's multiple poetry units in here. And again, we would often do this together because one, I think poetry is meant to be read out loud. It includes all the poems for you in here, which is really nice. But in order to really understand this information, it has to be more of a discussion base, explaining things, having questions, talking about the meaning of the poem. That's really hard to do just by yourself. And it's not something I think we should be expecting a 12-year-old to be able to do independently and get what they're supposed to out of it. So she really enjoys poetry in general. So we would read the poems together, talk about the meaning, and we would often do these questions together. That's why you don't see any writing in here, because we would just do it verbally. But again, I do think this is challenging her, which is really good. And what's really nice is that at the end of the year, there's a review throughout the book, but at the end of the year specifically, you spend the last 2-3 weeks just doing review from what you've learned that year, which I think is really helpful for the kids. So you can see here, we did all of the poetry together verbally. So we do not do the writing in here until we do finish IEW. The writing in Lighting Literature is weaker. It doesn't give a lot of direct instruction, and it also gives a really long period of time. So one of the assignments she did towards the end, because we start with IEW, and then once she finishes that up for the year, because there's only 24 weeks, 24 weeks, once she finishes that, we do the writing assignments in here using the model charts and outlines she learned from IEW as reference material. So she practices the skills that she's learned from IEW. So the last assignment was to write a opinion paper on the books. Pick a book she read in literature. Why was it her favorite book? It gave her 3 weeks to write that, including editing and all that. She laughed at that. With IEW, she's writing, 2 papers, 5 paragraphs, 7 paragraphs in 1 or 2 days. So she could finish that paper in, significant less time. And that's actually what she prefers. So this went well. For her, I did do year 2 level B. She's done IEW the last couple years. This is aimed at 7th grade, and I decided to go with 7th grade for her just because she trialed out the A version of this, and she was flying through it. So I know she was capable of doing B, the 7th grade version, even though she's in 6th grade, because she's had so much experience with IEW in the past, the structure and style. This is really easy for her to grasp and get the information. But again, she actually really likes this. She likes the structure of it. She likes that it's challenging her. Like I said, when we did the writing assignments towards the end of the year and here, she asked if we could go back to IEW because this was way too easy. It wasn't really challenging or causing any, growth. It was just, I thought she would actually enjoy having kind of like a downshift to something easier and just practice the skills she wants. But no, she wanted to keep being challenged. And I think you get that mentality when you provide challenging opportunities for your child, not just always, easing back or dumbing it down to make it less of a frustration. If they're constantly given things that are making them grow, I think they start to yearn for that and they don't want to do the easy thing. She doesn't want to be bored in her writing. So she has completely finished that. Like I said, she spent the, probably the last couple, maybe 2 months doing the writing in here, which again was super easy for her using we used the, like I said, model charts for that. Also something I brought in towards the end of the year was this Right Source. This is 5th grade, I believe, but I would just highlight, put a bookmark for her. So kind of summarize, which I think this is a really good reference book, summarize kind of the information because IEW will give you these little charts and stuff, which is helpful, but getting some of those details in, I think, was important. So I would just highlight or bookmark a part for her to be like, this is a reminder of what they're asking for. And she's done so many years of IEW at this point, including all the dress-ups is just habitual for her. So her writing is really well. I think one of the complaints with IEW is that, it lacks creative writing. She's wrote multiple stories this year just for fun. And it's actually really well written. We went to gymnastics last week and I had to take all the kids because my husband had a meeting. So my oldest brought her laptop and was working on her book and I was reading it and it had a really good, interesting, draw you in introduction and first paragraph. So I think if you're given the skills to write well, you can write anything. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. So we did do grammar in Lightning Literature, but I also brought in Michael Clay Thompson. I do get this question too. I think the grammar, especially this year, complemented Michael Clay Thompson Grammar Town. So the second, there's the pre-level, there's the first level, this is the second level, complemented each other well. This is a very, text, traditional academic route of grammar, and this is taking it from a completely different perspective. I think sometimes to understand a concept fully, we have to come at it from a different angle. And this is what I think Michael Clay Thompson does really well for her. It challenges her, but it also makes her understand the concept in a different way than the traditional straight up academic that you would normally see. So she finished Grammar Town, and this was just very much almost a review of the previous year or the previous level. And she started doing Practice Town. Again, Practice Town are just the sentence analysis. This is the teacher guide, not the student guide. So you can see here, I bought the student guide online from the website, and I just printed them out. That makes it easier than copying and printing. So she would do this, and it just helps her keep up to that. Again, I'm not a big fan of sentence diagramming. I think sentence analysis, at least for my kids, my brain, makes so much more sense. And then both of my kids have this, which I've printed, which is just kind of an outline of the basics that you learn in Michael Clay Thompson. So having these visuals here helps them understand the relationships between parts of speech, and then we're looking at parts of sentence. Again, I like highlighting specific words in here. It's very friendly to a brain. So this is a little packet that she has available at all times to help with this. So she would work through that. And then we are currently going through paragraph town right now. As you can see here, we've done all of this. We are going through paragraph town. And again, I think this is a really good curriculum. It's gonna approach things in a different way. She really likes the kind of silly stories. It's about, a fish visiting different islands and different towns and learning different things. So this one was specifically about a paragraph town, and all the sentences were weird and everything was messed up. She likes that sort of thing. I think attaching a story to it really is kind of helping grasp that, and having the long-term retention is helpful. So again, it's worked really well for both my kids. It's something we will continue to do, and we just do a section. Now, I bought mine used off eBay. So I just go to the Facebook website, and I printed teacher guides, kind of schedules, and they have various ones you can choose. Some people have made them up. Some people have created themselves. They just upload it to the file section. So I use that kind of as a guide of how to use Michael Clay Thompson, because you only get the implementation guide if you buy the full package, which I don't have the money for, so I buy it used. But that is why I do both grammar. I think they complement each other well. Some of the things in here I don't think were explained as good as in Michael Clay Thompson, so it's kind of supporting each other really well this year, and I don't think it can hurt. And I think this is one of the reasons she writes well. Besides understanding how to write, she understands very well the interplay of the parts of speech and parts of a sentence. So that is language arts. You can see the bulk of her stuff is very language arts heavy, and that's just because that's the area that she's passionate about, really enjoys, and finding things to kind of push her and growth is harder because it comes naturally to her. So that's why we bring in all those different elements, because she really enjoys it. So the only other thing she was doing besides academic stuff is her elective is horseback riding. She does that once a week with her instructor. She's been doing it for years now. Again, it's gone really well. She's been on every single horse that the stable has, from the youngest to the oldest to the smallest to the largest. And it's gone really well. This past month or so, she started galloping. So with the horse, she sometimes wears a saddle, sometimes she doesn't. Sometimes it's just a pad that attaches to the horse. To understand how your body affects your slight movements will kind of signal to the horse different things. So she was riding with just the pad and the reins, and they were galloping. I want to say galloping. I'm not a horse person. Cantering maybe, trotting. I know those are all different things, but I don't know the difference between them. She was slightly running with it, and she was doing corners. So kind of think of like the barrel racing you see at horse shows and stuff, but not at full speed. But she was going pretty fast. But her instinct when doing that, rounding the corner, was to tighten her legs around the horse, which tells the horse to go faster. And then her natural instinct is to lean forward to kind of stay on, which again is a signal to the horse to increase speed. So she went from, a slow gallop to full speed doing these circles. And for the first time, she actually fell off the horse. This was the first time she fell off since she started riding lessons a few years ago. So she's probably 4 years now. And she wears a helmet, and one of the first things she was trained on with the instructor is how to safely fall off a horse. So if you find a situation where the horse is kind of going too fast, or you can't stay on, whatever the situation, or they get spooked and you have to emergency dismount. How do you do that? So she's been trained on how to protect her body in those situations. Luckily, the horses immediately stop after the kid goes flying. They're trained that way. So there's no trampling or anything. But she was grounded in that corner and just her body went the other way, and she kind of got some air and flew there. And again, she was protected. She tucked and rolled, did exactly what she was supposed to, had her helmet on, so there's no injuries or anything. But she immediately got up and got back on that horse and kept doing it. And lo and behold, she fell off again. But it's one of those things that I think is really helpful for her because she's naturally a more quiet, reserved child, has very little aggressive or assertive tendencies. So for her to be able to control these, full-size horses, one of the horses is kind of like a diva that she listens really well once you put her in her place. So you have to prove to her that, you're worthy of riding her. That is an important skill for her to learn, especially because she is more quiet and reserved, and that she can absolutely stand up for herself and be the commanding voice. So I think horseback riding has really helped with that. And same thing with falling off and getting back up. She didn't, bat an eye. There was no tears. She just got up, got back on that horse and kept trying and continued to, she got it. I think those are really important life lessons to learn, that we just get back up and we keep trying, and sometimes we fail, and that's okay. So horseback riding has been really good for her and is something that we continue to do. Something else she did this past year is the library started a program for, I want to say 4th through 8th grade or 3rd through 8th grade, one of those, where it's kind of that in-between age group where it's not the little kids and it's not the high schoolers. It's an advisory board, so they get together and they do different projects, or they have different activities. Like last time they had a hot pocket night where they made their own hot pockets and played games and did different things. Sometimes it's specific library activities they're doing, so prepping for something, and then they get to choose certain books that the library should get, and they have, their kid advisory board. They get to pick different things and have a say in what the library's doing or the books they're supplying. She's really enjoyed it. She has a lot of fun going to that. One of her really good friends goes with her every time they have it, so she's really enjoyed that. And it's kind of her thing. My 8-year-old asked if she could go, although she's not technically in 3rd grade yet. She's, at the age where it wouldn't really matter. And my daughter's like, no, this is my thing. So it's really good for her to have kind of her own thing, her own little social outlet, and interacting with different people. And we know the children's librarian really well that runs it. So it's always interesting to see how things go with her. But she's really enjoyed that as well. One thing that we stopped doing this year was typing, and that's just because, like I said, she's been writing stories. We used to do the free typing, was it typing.com or whatever it was. She stopped doing that because she's just writing and using her laptop more. That is just naturally, she doesn't need to use a program anymore because she's writing stories and she's using her laptop for school and for, entertainment and things like that. She's naturally typing, which I think you give them the basic instruction, and then that's kind of how you type, right? You just get used to using a laptop or a computer and a keyboard that it comes with that. So I don't have her do any formal typing lessons anymore because she doesn't really need it, because she uses the technology that she has on hand. So that has been her year. So you can see we've got a lot accomplished. Again, she's at a level where there is some, again, she's at an age where there is some independence in her schoolwork, as you can see here. But just because she's, in 6th grade or 12 doesn't mean she should be doing all these things by herself. I do think, at least what I've seen online, is there's this big push for independence, and even younger grades than 6th grade, that you just hand them stuff and they're supposed to teach. And that's not how it works. There's still a lot of direct instruction that happens. Like I said in Lighting Lecture, something that she could do pretty much almost independently prior. I had to step in and do some teaching. And how did I know I needed to step in and do some teaching? Was because she came to me and said, this is a lot. I've noticed in her work she was missing a few of the concepts. So that checking on my part as the teacher kind of signaled to me that I need to step in and provide more direct instruction. So that's, I think, really important. Don't just assume because your kid's in middle school or high school or a certain age means that they don't need you to teach them. Just because we're homeschooling doesn't mean we just hand books to kids and expect them to read them. And I don't think just reading books is education. We have to have more, we have to have discussion, we have to break things down. So that has gone really well for her. I think we've had this really good balance of trust and years of working, that she can do things independently, absolutely, but there are times that she needs me to do things too, and there is sometimes a struggle with that she wants to do it herself, especially when things like spelling, because it's one of the things that takes more effort for her, that doesn't naturally come, especially in language arts where that's her natural field, that she gets frustrated when she doesn't get the word right and she doesn't want to listen to me explain the rule of why it's like that, but she's not going to learn unless it is explained and understands the concept. So there are moments of those frustration. I don't want you to think it's all, sunshine and rainbows over here. She's 12, she's a preteen, hormones are up there and everywhere, that there are moments like that, but we've also worked through years of trust and respect to each other, that sometimes it's me walking away and saying, okay, you need a minute, I'll be back, I'm gonna go work with one of your siblings, or I'm gonna go get a snack, and she will get up, get water, get some chocolate, kind of come back, and then we're ready to work. Because those hormones, those frustrations are absolutely gonna happen, even if you have, a type A perfect student. That's gonna happen, to be prepared for that, but we are prepared for that. We've talked about human body, we've talked about puberty, we've done the information, she knows what's going on, that we have things in place that when these moments happen, we take a breather, usually from each other, because the frustration just kind of goes up and up. But ultimately, she understands that to learn, she has to be ready to learn, and that disrespecting me is not a way we're going to learn. And I understand that disrespect, if it's not always meant as disrespect, it's just an hormonal outburst. So understanding each other and having grace for each other, I think, is important, but also not just throwing it to the side and not doing it, or putting it off just because it's hard or it's frustrating. There's a lot of things going on there. It's nothing to do with the curriculum. It's hormones. So that would be kind of what I would say when you're going into these middle school years, is those are gonna make a factor, and luckily we've done such a good job with scheduling, consistency, preparing her knowledge, what's going on in the body, having things that we do when those moments come up, and that so far it's going well. I hope it continues to go well as middle school continues, but I do think having that strong relationship of understanding, grace, and respect for one another does really help in these hormonal years. But that would be kind of the only thing I would say about 6th grade that has been different than other grades, is that we're getting the frustration not from the material or the curriculum, what's being asked from her, but just the emotional aspect of what's bubbling up in those changes in her brain and body. So her year has gone really well. She accomplished everything that I had planned and set out for her, which I just want to remind you that it is possible to make a plan and get the work done every day. At the end of the year, say you got everything done, everything went well. You can see there were adjustments made. I didn't remove things, minus typing, just because she didn't need it anymore. I didn't remove curriculum, but I did supplement certain areas that I saw she needed additional help or needed some scaffolding that wasn't in the curriculum we were using. Again, that's part of being a teacher. It's a part of direct instruction. You learn where your kids need these certain areas. This is something I've been doing for the last 4 years, so I think I'm pretty good at adjusting to meet my kids' needs. So if you have any specific questions about 6th grade or anything I talked about, let me know in the comments down below. I will do a separate video on family subjects, because again, these videos get longer. Having a separate video for family subjects is just easier, but in case you want to know, our family subjects are history. We did core knowledge United States history Monday through Thursday this year. We did art on Tuesdays, which again I'll talk about in that video. Wednesdays we did social justice units. Thursdays and Friday we did core knowledge grade 5 science, and Friday we did philosophy. So those were our additional subjects, and then throughout the year we had certain things we did too. November we always do a Native American Heritage Month. December we always do some type of specific study. So I will talk about those things in family subjects, but this was the bulk of her 6th grade, and additionally family subjects. So If you have any questions, let me know. If not, thank you for watching.